Just how much does age matter when it comes to fantasy football? That's what we're going to explore in today's video. Before we get into it, just a quick PSA. If you could please like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would go a long way into helping us grow. We're currently at 210 subscribers, and we're looking to get to about 250 by the time training camp starts. It is Thursday, June 22nd, so we're about a month away from that. Help us out. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment if you'd like. So in today's video, like I said in the intro, we are looking at age. You hear it all the time in fantasy football, specifically with running backs, which is what position we're looking at today, is age. There's a number that running backs get to. When they hit this age number, avoid them, they fall off. And I really wanted to explore this. Is it really true for one? What are the exceptions? Are there any commonalities with the exceptions? Because almost every year, it seems like we do see one or two older running backs give us fantasy productive seasons. And I kind of wanted to find some commonalities there. And I wanted to just see, is it really just age? Is there other factors involved? So that's what we're going to look at today. So to get started here, we're going to just kind of look at the raw numbers of fantasy football finishes in the ages for running back. So if you see here, I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can see it. If you see here, I went and back to 2013, an even number, 10 years ago. That's 10 seasons from 2013 to 2022, and kind of just charted the top 10, top 20, top 30, and the ages of running backs and where they were finishing. You can see, for top 10 running backs, very heavy from that 22 to 26 age range. Mostly, not a lot in 25, 21 as well, but, not a lot of running backs come in at the age of 21. And this was also the age they were for the majority of the season, not necessarily, maybe they turned 22 in the beginning of the year, 2 weeks in, then they were considered 22 years old. But you can see a huge favorable towards these 22 through 26-year-olds. 27, 28, you also have it. And then there's this drop-off, and we hear it all the time. Age 29, running backs drop off. And, there is something to this, obviously. You can see the numbers here. Basically, from age 29 on, there's only been 10 running backs in the last 10 years who are 29 years or older to finish in the top 10 for PPR leagues. Same thing for in the top 20. Only 10 running backs, 29 or older, to finish in the top 20, between 10 and 20, 11 and 20 in PPR leagues. Top 30, you get more. We have 21 guys. If you can see down here the number, we have 21 guys that are finishing between 21 and 30 in PPR leagues that are 29 plus, which makes sense because top 30, these type of running backs are not making huge impacts. Even top 20, between basically after like top 17, 18, like these running backs, if you really look at the numbers, aren't making a huge impact. They're not worthless, but you really need those top 15, 16 guys in order to win championships. So by just looking at these raw numbers, yes, age is important when it comes to running back production. However, I think we're doing a little bit of a disservice to ourselves, and it's a little bit disingenuous to just say, okay, if you're, once you hit 29, I'm done with you. You're no longer going to be productive, right? And I think a lot of people think this way. And so I decided to kind of look into, well, who are these running backs? Who are these running backs that are finishing top 10, top 15? Is there any commonalities between these players? So let me show you here another Excel sheet that I made. Looking at some running backs, and since 2013, running backs that were 29 or older for the majority of the season finished in the top 16. Okay, so there's actually only 15 running backs that have finished top 16 who are 29 or older in PPR leagues. You can see the names here. You can see the ages. You can see the year in which it happened. You can see their running back finish. You can see their stats. We'll get into what's beyond that in just a second. But again, you see it. Fred Jackson was 32. He was RB10. Pierre Thomas, Matt Forte, Justin Forsett, Fred Jackson again. We had Adrian Peterson there. Frank Gore's in here a couple times. LaShawn McCoy, Mark Ingram. So 15 guys, only 15 guys. So the number is not very high. Now, I don't want to just say this is only because of age. Obviously, teams are going to lean towards younger players. If you had a choice between a 30-year-old running back or a 22-year-old running back, you're probably going to go to the 22-year-old just because there's more potential there. You kind of know what you have with these guys that are age 29, 30, 31. So I think that plays a lot into it. So already that number is going to be limited of the running backs that can produce at this age because teams are just not going to want to buy into them as much. But I was really, really curious as to these running backs that are finishing top 16. I did top 16 again. Well, first of all, we need to cut it off somewhere, right? If I cut it off at top 16, people are going to say, why didn't you do top 17? You cut it off at top 20, people are going to say, why didn't you do top 21? You have to cut it off somewhere. And like I said before, and I was looking at the numbers, even these running backs that are finishing, 20th best, they're not really doing a whole lot to help you win fantasy championships, unless for whatever reason they had, a 6-7 week stretch run that kind of put them into that top 20. So I decided to just look at the top 16. Now, I thought it was really interesting here, and you can see we're going to focus on these two columns here, is that their total carries before the season in which they finished top 16, and their total touches. Total touches is carries and receptions. I decided to break it up a little bit because I think we can agree that a carry probably does more damage to the body than the typical reception. I think anytime you touch the ball as a running back carry, what is it? 90% of the time you're going to get some kind of hit. You're going to get hit at some point. Yeah, there's the occasional, you don't even get touched, score a touchdown, go out of bounds, whatever. But for the most part, it's in between the tackles. You're taking a lot of hits every time you carry the ball, whereas a reception maybe a little less damaging to the body. But I wanted to break it up into the two different categories: total carries, total touches. And I think it's really interesting here. Again, we have 15 running backs who have finished top 16 or better in PPR leagues since 2013. And these guys are 29 or older. So I think it's really interesting here that if you look at the total carries before their season, that 10 of these 15 guys were either around 1,500 carries or less in their careers. Okay, and I think that's going to be an important number for us as we kind of dive more into this. At around or under 1,500 carries. Fred Jackson had less than 1,000 carries. Pierre Thomas had less than 650 carries in his RB16 season at age 29. Matt Forte, he was at 1,550, so a little bit higher. I still highlighted him. Justin Forsett, he had less than 350 carries at his age 29 RB8 season. We have, again, Danny Woodhead, D'Angelo Williams under 1,500 carries, LeGarrette Blount under 900, Mark Ingram under 1,350. So Cordell Patterson's obviously a little bit of a unicorn in that he was kind of a receiver his whole career until a couple of years ago. But very, very interesting. Only 5 guys: Adrian Peterson, Matt Forte in 2015, Frank Gore twice, and LaShawn McCoy. Okay, only 5 guys, 4 guys and Frank Gore twice, had 1,500 or more carries in the season in which they were 29 or older and finished in the top 16. So I think it's very interesting. Maybe we should be looking a little bit more at carries rather than age. If we get a guy like a Fred Jackson, who, he's 32, should we just completely discount him because he's 32? Or should we look more into it? Well, he doesn't have a lot of carries on his body that he has a better chance to produce. I think there's something to this. Another thing that I think is very, very interesting is if you look at all these guys and the stats in which they had, there's really only one guy, I would say, and that's Adrian Peterson. He's kind of the only guy that put up a top 16 fantasy season basically purely on his rushing yards. He only had 30 catches. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll quickly search how many. He had 1,700 plus total yards in that 2015 season, which is crazy. Doing that at the age of 30. Only 222 of those were receiving yards. So he basically had 1,500 yards rushing. He's kind of the only guy that did it purely as a rusher. All the other guys, either their catching, their receiving work came into play, or like a LeGarrette Blount, he had an 18 touchdown year. If you kind of have that, he has a solid season of 1,150 yards and 9 touchdowns, but I don't know if it's a top 10 season, maybe a top 16 season. But Adrian Peterson's really the only guy who's kind of doing it purely from his rushing work, and I think that's kind of an important thing to also keep in mind. Maybe you could say Frank Gore in 2015 as well. Only 34 catches, 1,234 yards. He would have. I think I put it here. He would have had less than 1,000 total yards if he didn't have the receiving work. But you can maybe add him in there. But all these other guys, Danny Woodhead, 80 catches. Fred Jackson, 66, 47 catches. Pierre Thomas, 77 catches. Matt Forte, 100 catches, 45 catches, right? Even Frank Gore in this season, 38 catches, four of them were for receiving touchdowns. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Very, very rare that you're going to have a guy over the age 29 or older, especially a guy who has a lot of carries on their body. It seems like if you can't really rely on their pure rushing work. So the next thing I wanted to get into here, and I'm going to pull it up, is kind of looking at the running back cliff. Okay, we're looking at the cliff for running backs. I went back and looked at some running backs, over the last 10, 15 years or so, guys who were good running backs for a long stretch of time, and just, where they fell off, essentially. Okay. Jamal Charles is a good example. Jamal Charles was a fantasy stud for a good stretch, a 3, 4, 5 year stretch. 2014 was his last big year. At that time, he had 1,250 carries, 1,500 touches, and then he kind of fell off. Now, maybe injuries, there's other factors that play into it, injuries and all of that. But I think it's interesting just to kind of look at these touches and carries and see where they fell off. Also, I put a 3-year span up until when they fell off. So that would be 2012, 2013, 2014. What was their 3-year span up until that year in which they fell off, which I think maybe is something to look at as well. Because if you get a large amount of work in a 3-year span, it could play into it. LaShawn McCoy, we talked about, huge number of carries, over 2,000 carries, over 2,500 touches, and then he fell off. Marshawn Lynch, about 2,000 carries, over 2,250 touches. Also notice in a 3-year span, leading up to 2015, he had almost 900 carries and almost 1,000 total touches, which is a crazy number. That's a huge number. Chris Johnson, another guy who fell off pretty quickly at the age of 29, I believe. 1,750 carries, over 2,000 touches, and again, in a 3-year span leading up to 2014, over 800 carries, 950 touches. Le'Veon Bell, he had almost 1,500 carries, over 850 touches in his career. I didn't put the 3-year span because he had that contract dispute, which he held out, which kind of messes up the 3-year span numbers. But 1,500 carries, 850 touches. Maurice Jones-Drew, another guy, 1,500 carries, over 1,750 touches. Look at his 3-year span numbers leading up to 2012. So 2009, 2010, 2011, he had 950 carries and almost 1,100 touches. He was 26 years old when he fell off. Keep this in mind, because when we talk about, well, maybe there's older running backs that can produce for us, I think we can look at it on the reverse side of who are the younger running backs who are kind of getting run into the ground. We need to kind of pay attention to these as well, because Maurice Jones-Drew was a good running back. You can't just say, well, it's because of age he fell off. He was 26 years old in his 2011 season, and then he fell off. So it wasn't age for him. What was it? Maybe it was carries. Maybe it was touches, especially this 3-year span of getting over almost 1,100 touches in a 3-year span. Arian Foster, another guy, 1,400 carries, over 1,600 touches, 3-year span, 700. I think he had more injury stuff at the end of his career. So, he kind of fell off pretty quickly. Ezekiel Elliott, his 2021 season, last year just wasn't a very good season. I don't know where he finished in RB numbers. Like maybe he was a top 20 guy still, but he really wasn't effective, especially for where you drafted him. I'm just kind of quickly checking now where Ezekiel Elliott finished last year for running backs. He played basically all year, so no, he missed a few games, but he finished as RB22. Just wasn't really good last year, so I put his last good year as at year 2021. Only 26. I think a lot of people don't realize that Ezekiel Elliott played the entire year last year at 27 years old. He's not even 28 yet. I think he turns 28 in this month or next month or something. But he's not at that 29-year-old running back cliff. So how do we explain? Ezekiel Elliott was a stud. He was one of the best running backs in the NFL to start his career. How do we explain this drop-off? We can't just say, well, it's due to age, right? I mean, look at it. Just looking at his numbers now, like Zeke putting up 2,000 total yards, 16 touchdowns. Even in 2017 where he missed 6 games, 1,250 yards, 9 touchdowns. 2018, he had 2,000 total yards, 9. The guy was a fantasy gold mine, and he just completely fell off. 2021 was his last good season when he was 26 years old. We look at his touches, 1,650 carries up until through his 2021 season, almost 2,000 touches through his 2021 season. 3-year span, again, some big numbers there. Sean Alexander going way back into the mid-2000s. 2005, his last good year, he had 1,700 carries, 1,900 touches. I think you're getting the point. Todd Gurley, another guy, 2019 is when his last good year. He had 1,000 carries, 1,200 touches, but look at his 3-year span numbers of over 800 carries, almost 1,000 touches in a 3-year span. Todd Gurley was like 25 years old when he fell off. I know he had a degenerative knee issue, so that could play. There's a lot of factors that play into this, but I think just what my point, I guess I'm trying to get to here is we need to, I think, start looking more at their workload and their carry load and less about their age, because teams and players, not teams, but players, fantasy football players are going to write off older running backs, and you can find these guys for really, really good value, whether it's in redraft football, in dynasty football. You can find these guys, especially in dynasty football, because people will just think about age all the time. He's 29. I want him off my roster. You can probably get some guys that we're going to look at here in just a second. Some older guys that are getting to that 28, 29 threshold. You might be able to get these guys super, super cheap. 3rd round, 4th round picks. Just throw a 3rd or 4th round pick. You can use them for this year. When it comes to running backs in dynasty football, specifically, how many running backs can we really look beyond 2023 and know their situation? I can think of Bijan Robinson. I can think of Breece Hall. I'm just trying to think of other running backs. What other running backs can we really look beyond 2023 and say, I know for sure they're going to be the main guy for this team? Not even Jonathan Taylor. He's coming up on a contract. This is probably his last year with the Colts. Austin Eckler, probably his last year with the Chargers. McCaffrey, I don't know what his contract situation is. I'll kind of check it right now. But all these guys, Kenneth Walker, look at the Kenneth Walker thing. We thought Kenneth Walker could be one of these guys where, we know what he's going to be for the next 3-4 years. And they draft Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round, right? Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe you can throw Jahmyr Gibbs in there. We kind of know his role. But my point is, when it comes to dynasty football, people put too much stock into age sometimes, especially with the running backs. I don't care necessarily if I can see a path for you this year, then you are valuable to me, because 90% of the other running backs, I cannot see a path anyways, whether you're young or you're old. So it looks like McCaffrey, looks like they have a potential out after this year or next year. I don't know. We'll see about McCaffrey. But let's look at some guys. We'll kind of wrap this up a little bit by looking at a couple things. Looking at some current older running backs and their workload. We got several running backs here that are coming up to that age threshold where people are basically going to say, I don't want them anymore. And I think we can take advantage of that and find some value, whether if it's in, round 12 of your redraft league or for a fourth round pick in your dynasty league or whatever. So looking at it here, these are all guys, seven guys here that are either age 29 or they're going to be age 29 next year, this year or next year. Derrick Henry, we know, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, James Conner, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt. These are some guys that have been pretty relevant fantasy football running backs over the last 4 or 5 years. And they're all coming up they're getting old, right? Dalvin Cook at the beginning of the 2024 season will be 29. Same with Kamara. Eckler will be 29. Connor, all these guys will be 29 or older by either this year or next year. And we kind of look at this, if we go back to what the average was, I didn't tell you guys, but the average for the running back cliff, the average number of carries was right around 1,600 yards for the running backs. They started to fall off, and around 1,800 yards, total touches. 1,800 touches, about 1,600 carries. Those are the numbers for the cliff, right, of what the running backs were doing when they fell off. So if we look at it, Derrick Henry is probably the biggest guy to be concerned with. He's 29 and a half years old. He has well over 1,500 carries, but 1,750, almost 1,900 touches, a crazy 3-year span. And remember, he missed 7-8 games in 2021, and he still has almost 950 carries and over 1,000 touches in his last 3 years. So he's the one guy that if you want to kind of avoid, I'm not going to blame you. I really think that fantasy football, how unpredictable fantasy football is, it's really about minimizing your risks, in my opinion. And so I'm okay with avoiding Derrick Henry. If I can get him maybe in the late second or early third, maybe I'll take a shot there. But taking him in the first or early second round, I'm going to be a little concerned with. Dalvin Cook, if we look at it, even Dalvin Cook, this year, I think he can still be productive. He's still under that 1,500 carry threshold. He's still under that 1,800 touch threshold. But next year, depending on what team he goes to, if he gets a similar workload as he's had, during his healthy years, he's going to be at that 1,500 carry threshold and close to that 1,800 or over that 1,800 touch threshold. Other guys, though, Kamara. Alvin Kamara, has less than 1,200 carries on his career, less than 1,600 touches. He obviously catches the ball a lot. Austin Eckler doesn't even have a little over 800 carries, 1,200 touches. I can see him surviving a couple more years because of this. I don't think just because he turns 29, he's just going to be done. James Conner is another guy that people don't like. I think he's falling to 5th, 6th round in redraft. And I'm just thinking this guy, when healthy, and yeah, he'll probably be hurt for a couple games or 4 or 5 games, but when healthy is one of the best running backs over the last couple of years with Arizona. I don't really see that changing. James Conner has less than just over 900 carries, less than 1,150 touches in his career. Doesn't have a huge 3-year workload as well. Leonard Fournette, he's kind of getting there. We'll see what team he lands on. Kareem Hunt, another guy who doesn't even have 900 carries, just over 1,100 touches. Hasn't been used a lot in his career. So, I look at Eckler, Connor, Kareem Hunt, maybe Kamara, and I think, I'm not just going to necessarily bail out on these guys just because they turn 29. So that's kind of my whole point here. If you can get these guys for value, whether it's in redraft or dynasty, next year maybe you can get Eckler for super cheap. Now, if you can sell these guys for first round picks, do it. Do it. But don't sell these guys for cheap just because they turn 29. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, last thing before I wrap this video up, on the flip side, we talked about, touches being maybe more important than age. Now, we got to turn that around and look at younger guys. Ezekiel Elliott, again, 26 years old when he fell off. Todd Gurley, even younger when he fell off. So what is the explanation for these guys who were stud running backs, right? Maurice Jones-Drew was another guy. What's the explanation for these guys who are top tier fantasy running backs who all of a sudden fell off before the age of 28? And maybe it's workload. So a few guys here to kind of pay attention to. I'm not saying these guys are done or these guys are going to suck, but kind of monitor their workload, and maybe you can maximize, just like we talked about on buying Austin Eckler or Kamara or Hunt, buying them cheap. Maybe you can maximize and sell these guys really high because you monitor their workload. Josh Jacobs is going to be 26 this entire 2023 season. So you would assume 26, 27, 28. A lot of people are going to assume 3 more years of Josh Jacobs being a stud. Well, we look at his numbers here. He has over 1,000, almost 1,100 total carries, 1,200 total touches in his career. Last 2 years, he's had over 550 touches and over 650 touches, 550 carries. So if he has a similar workload to what he did last year, he's going to be around 1,400 carries, and he's going to be, closer to about 1,650 total touches. That's where you start getting into, and then his 3-year carries are going to be close to that, 900 carries over 3 years. That's where you start thinking, ooh, he's getting a huge workload. Najee Harris, in his first 2 years in his career, he's had over almost 580 carries, almost 700 touches already. So we double that in a 4-year career. You're looking at 1,400 touches and almost 1,200 carries. Najee Harris could be one of these guys who have a short career, like an Ezekiel Elliott, who fall off at the age of 27. Jonathan Taylor, I know he was hurt. He was hurt in 2021 for some time, but he's had over 750 carries in his 3-year career, over 850 touches, and that would be even more if he didn't get hurt. So just some guys, younger guys who are getting, a pretty large workload, just to monitor those guys. And maybe in a year or two, when people still think, Josh Jacobs comes off of another stud year, you can sell him knowing that his carry and touch total is getting very high. So I hope this helped you guys. I find it pretty interesting looking at this and just kind of dissecting, and I think, again, it's doing a disservice to us. It's just saying 29 years old running backs. Nope. Let's look at how these guys were producing. The guys who were producing at an older 29, 30, 31, 32 years old. Why were they producing? Summary of it, a quick summary of it is most of the guys didn't have a large workload, and most of the guys depended on their catch and their receiving game to put them into that top 16. So there you have it, guys. That's all for today's video. I'm going to make another one of these looking at receivers. And receivers, I think the age fall off is more like 31. And I just want to know, because there's a number of receivers who are older than 30, 31 years old who produce and give you good fantasy football seasons. Can we find some commonalities there? Appreciate it, guys, if you watched. I will be back with the other video. Like I said, if you could please like this one and subscribe, it would help a lot to make more of these. And I'll catch you guys all